Deep in the heart of southern Africa stands a mystery that has baffled historians, engineers, and treasure hunters for centuries. This is Great Zimbabwe, the impossible city built without mortar, a sprawling metropolis of granite that defies the very laws of time and decay. Rising from the mist of the Zimbabwean plateau, these massive walls, some reaching 11 meters into the sky, stand without a single drop of cement, no adhesive, and no iron supports. They are locked in place by nothing more than the sheer weight of the stone and the genius of the hands that placed them. For over 400 years, this site has been the subject of a fierce tug-of-war between fact and fiction. Early European explorers, blinded by prejudice, refused to believe that African hands could craft such geometric perfection. They invented stories of lost white tribes, biblical queens, and alien interventions to explain away the undeniable evidence before their eyes. But the stones do not lie. Today, we are peeling back the layers of myth to reveal the forensic truth. We will walk through the Valley of Ruins, decode the acoustic telephone used by ancient kings to project their voices like gods, and uncover the thermal engineering that allowed builders to slice granite like bread. This is not just a pile of rocks, it is a testament to human ingenuity that rivaled the castles of medieval Europe. Welcome to the enigma of the House of Stone. For decades, the true origins of this granite metropolis were deliberately obscured by colonial denial and wild theories. When the Portuguese first heard whispers of a massive stone fortress in the interior during the 16th century, they didn't ask how it was built. They asked where the gold was. The legend of King Solomon's mines in the biblical land of Ophir became the lens through which the outside world viewed this African wonder. They simply could not compute that a civilization in the southern hemisphere had developed high-precision masonry independently. This denial reached its peak in the late 19th century when amateur archaeologist Richard Hall was hired by the British South Africa Company. In a heartbreaking act of archaeological vandalism, Hall stripped the site of nearly 2 meters of stratified history. He threw away pottery, iron tools, and artifacts that proved indigenous construction, labeling them as filth from a later occupation. He was desperate to find Phoenician or Egyptian relics that didn't exist. By the time genuine scientific inquiry began in the 20th century, the site was a crime scene, its timeline fractured by men who wanted to rewrite history. However, one artifact survived the looting to tell the true story: the famous Zimbabwe Birds. Carved from soapstone and perched on stone monoliths, these eagle-like figures are uniquely Shona in design. They represent the chapung, or bataleur eagle, a messenger of the ancestors in Shona cosmology. Their presence in the sacred enclosures wasn't just decoration, it was a spiritual stamp of ownership. But the story of these birds is also a story of theft. 8 of these sculptures were stolen in the late 19th century, sold to museums in Cape Town and Berlin, or kept as private trophies by colonial administrators. It took nearly a century for most of them to be returned to their homeland. The most significant finding, however, wasn't stone, but wood. Radiocarbon dating of the wooden lintels found, trapped in the stonework, finally settled the debate. The city was built between the 11th and 15th centuries AD by the ancestors of the modern Shona people, specifically the Gokomere and Gizo cultures. It wasn't a lost colony. It was the capital of a homegrown empire. The most mind-bending aspect of Great Zimbabwe is not just its size, but its impossible engineering. How do you cut millions of granite bricks without iron saws, laser cutters, or modern machinery? To understand the magnitude of this feat, you must understand the material. Unlike the sandstone used in Egyptian pyramids or the limestone of European cathedrals, granite is notoriously hard and unforgiving. It destroys soft iron tools. The answer lies in a masterful understanding of thermodynamics. The builders didn't fight the stone, they outsmarted it. The site sits on a massive granite batholith, a geological formation that naturally peels in layers, a process known as exfoliation. The ancient engineers accelerated this process using a technique called thermal shock. They would light massive fires along the granite outcrops, heating the rock until it was searing hot. Then they would douse the stone with cold water. The sudden temperature drop caused the granite to fracture along natural stress lines, peeling off in uniform, flat slabs. These slabs were then knapped with hammerstones into the brick-like blocks you see today. It was an industrial assembly line fueled by fire and water. Once the bricks were shaped, the real challenge began. Gravity. The walls of Great Zimbabwe are built using dry stone masonry. There is no mortar. If you pull one stone out, the friction and weight of the surrounding stones keep the structure intact, but only if the geometry is perfect. As the walls rose higher, the builders utilized a technique called battering. This means the walls slope slightly inward as they go up. This inward lean shifts the center of gravity toward the core of the wall, preventing the massive weight from buckling outward. It is a feat of physics that requires immense foresight. Archaeologists have identified 3 distinct styles of walling that show the evolution of this skill over centuries. They call them Class P, Class Q, and Class R. Class P walls are the earliest, uneven, rough, and struggling to stay upright. But then we see the shift to Class Q. This is the peak of Zimbabwe architecture. The blocks are perfectly rectangular, the courses run in straight, uninterrupted lines, and the battering is precise. This wasn't just construction, it was art. Here's a question for you. If you could travel back in time to witness the construction of one ancient wonder, would you choose the pyramids of Giza or the Great Enclosure of Zimbabwe? Let us know in the comments below. To truly understand the city, we must dissect its 3 distinct anatomical parts: the hill, the valley, and the Great Enclosure. Each served a specific function in the machinery of the empire. First, we have the hill complex, the oldest part of the city. Perched on a steep cliff 80 meters above the valley, this was the spiritual and royal acropolis. It is a labyrinth of narrow passages and massive boulders incorporated into the walls. Here in the eastern enclosure, the king or the spirit mediums would preside over rituals. But the hill complex hides a sonic secret. Directly below the enclosure is a natural cave with specific acoustic properties. Recent tests have confirmed a telephone effect. A voice spoken at a normal volume in this cave is amplified and projected clearly into the valley below. It is highly probable that the king used this to issue decrees to the commoners, his voice booming down from the cliffs like the voice of Mwari, or God. Below the hill lies the Great Enclosure, the most iconic structure of sub-Saharan Africa. Built later in the 14th century, this massive elliptical wall is 250 meters in circumference. Its purpose has been debated for years. Was it a fortress? Unlikely. The entrances were originally wide and open, and the walls do not offer strategic firing positions. Current consensus suggests it was a royal residence, possibly for the queen or the king's first wife, and a center for initiation ceremonies. Inside stands the conical tower, a solid stone structure 10 meters high. Early Victorian explorers obsessed over it as a phallic symbol, but in the context of Shona agriculture, it resembles a grain bin. It likely symbolized the king's role as the provider, the ultimate protector against famine, a stone silo that would never be empty. Finally, we have the valley ruins. This maze of walls between the hill and the Great Enclosure was the residential area for the elite. It's important to visualize what this looked like in 1350 AD. The stone walls were not the houses themselves. The people lived in daga huts, houses made of clay and thatch, built within and around these stone enclosures. The stone was for privacy, prestige, and screening. It separated the nobility from the dust of the commoners. But to maintain such a large population of elites, the city needed more than just walls. It needed a connection to the world. Excavations in the valley ruins have uncovered a treasure trove that proves Great Zimbabwe was a hub of international commerce. We have found Ming Dynasty porcelain from China, Persian faience pottery from the Middle East, and thousands of glass beads from India. This city was not isolated. It was the southern anchor of a trade network that stretched across the Indian Ocean. But the stones present a bigger problem than gravity: thirst. How did 18,000 people survive on a dry granite hilltop? For years, historians assumed the population must have been smaller because the local water sources couldn't support a medieval metropolis. But new research has flipped this assumption on its head. Great Zimbabwe was not just a stone city, it was a hydraulic machine. Surrounding the city are large depressions known as Dhaka Pits. For decades, archaeologists believed these were simply mines where the builders dug up clay to build their huts. But recent LiDAR scans and hydrological analysis have revealed a dual purpose. These pits were strategically placed to capture surface runoff during the rainy season and to tap into groundwater seepage. They were lined with clay to act as massive sponges, creating artificial reservoirs that stored water for the dry months. The builders didn't just stack stone, they engineered the landscape to harvest every drop of rain. This water system was crucial for the empire's true wealth, cattle. While Great Zimbabwe is famous for its gold trade, exporting tons of gold to the Swahili coast to buy Chinese porcelain and Persian glass, the internal economy ran on cows. Isotope analysis of cattle teeth found in the city's middens has revealed a fascinating banking system. The cattle eaten at the capital were not raised there. The local grass would have been overgrazed in weeks. Instead, the isotopes show the cattle were raised in the Lowveld, nearly 100 kilometers away, and walked to the city as tribute. The king managed a decentralized portfolio of livestock, keeping his wealth spread out to preserve the environment at the capital. This biological wealth was far more stable than gold. A cow can reproduce, a gold nugget cannot. This sophisticated economic model allowed the rulers to maintain power for centuries, feeding a city that was larger than London was at the time. Empires do not die overnight. They fade, they shift, and they transform. Around 1450 AD, the fires of Great Zimbabwe began to cool. The stone masonry quality dropped to Class R, rough, uncoursed, and hasty. The city was eventually abandoned, leaving the great walls to the baboons and the creeping vegetation. Why did they leave? There was no evidence of a great war, no signs of a massacre, and no charred layer indicating a conquering fire. The collapse was likely ecological and political. A city of that size consuming wood for fires and construction would have deforested the surrounding area within a few generations. The resources simply ran out. Simultaneously, the trade routes shifted. New powers were rising to the north in the Mutapa state and to the west in the Torwa state, centered at the Kami ruins. The gold trade moved, and the people followed the wealth. Great Zimbabwe was not destroyed, it was relocated. Its legacy is not just in the stones that remain, but in the name of the country that now bears its title, Zimbabwe, Houses of Stone. It stands as a silent rebuke to those who doubted African ingenuity, a granite monument to a civilization that mastered gravity, trade, and acoustics long before the first colonial ship appeared on the horizon. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of the ancient world, make sure to like and subscribe to Ancient Chronicles HD. We are rewriting history, one stone at a time. Click the video on your screen now to explore another impossible ancient structure.